I finally realized I had stopped telling him everything. When the company assigned me to a business trip, I signed the papers immediately without consulting him. When my best friend invited couples to her wedding, I attended alone and gave her a nice wedding gift. Even when I felt ill and needed surgery, I booked the appointment without his consent. As a doctor, Tony frowned when he found out about the surgery. Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Give me your medical records. I'll arrange everything for you. Without a second thought, I replied, no need. I can handle it myself. I don't want to trouble you. Thank you. The moment the words left my mouth, both of us froze. Less than a month ago, I was completely dependent on him. Back then, I couldn't even choose an outfit for a date, or decide what to eat for lunch without texting him. First surgery tomorrow. Why the rush? My attending physician handed me my medical chart, his tone laced with confusion. Dr. Frank will be back from his business trip soon. Why don't you wait for him to return so that he can accompany you? This is my personal matter. I interrupted softly. I can handle it myself. The doctor looked at me in surprise. After all, I was known as a fragile woman around here. Even for minor issues like a headache or a mild fever, I would stubbornly cling to Tony and insist he stayed by my side. The moment I stepped out of the consultation room, I ran straight into a familiar figure. Tony was wheeling a suitcase with one hand. He looked as if he had rushed straight to the hospital the moment his flight landed. As always, Yvonne was right by his side. Draped over her shoulders was a black cashmere overcoat, the same one I gifted Tony for our 3rd anniversary. Tony frowned the moment he saw me. What are you doing here? Are you sick again? Again, his tone carried a familiar, deep-seated impatience. Made me feel as if I was just a troublesome chore that always needed urgent handling. He snatched the medical chart from my hands and scanned it briefly. He ordered, I have things to do tomorrow. Change your surgery time to next week, so that I will be able to go with you. Without thinking twice, I spilled. No need. I can handle it myself. I don't want to trouble you. Thank you. The excessive politeness and sudden distance left Tony visibly stunned. After all, the old me would have cried and begged for his comfort over a simple paper cut. I used to bombard his phone with messages every single day, forcing him to pick out my outfits. From something as small as my 3 daily meals to life's biggest decisions, I always consulted Tony first. Yet here I was facing a surgical procedure alone, without batting an eye. If we hadn't crossed paths by pure chance, he, my boyfriend, wouldn't have even known about it. I grabbed my medical chart back. In the process, I accidentally knocked a medicine box out of Tony's hand. The name of the medication came clearly into view. It was a box of contraceptives. Don't misunderstand, Tony said, as he bent down to pick it up. His voice had returned to its usual professional, detached tone. Yvonne suffers from severe dysentery. This is a common medication used to alleviate the pain. Yvonne pulled the oversized coat tighter around herself. She explained with a soft and flustered voice. I'm so sorry, Mary. Dr. Frank was actually on his way home. It's all my fault for being so useless. The pain was so bad that I could barely stand, so I troubled him to come with me to get this description. She paused, her tone shifting to one of sincere envy. I wish I could be as independent as you, Mary. That way, Dr. Frank wouldn't have to work so hard running around for me. I remembered a time when my abdomen was in excruciating pain. I asked Tony which department I should register for. I was surprised by what Tony, the youngest deputy chief of neurology at a top-tier hospital, told me. He said he didn't know. Whenever I complained about his dismissiveness, he would pinch the bridge of his nose with deep exhaustion. He would look at me as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. Can't you look up minor things like this yourself? You're an adult. Can't you be a little more independent? Stop relying on me like a giant infant all the time. I'm not your parent. It's not my obligation to teach you basic life skills. How hilarious he was. A man of few words. If it was about me, his girlfriend. But he could personally escort his junior to a consultation and picked up her medication. To outsiders, Yvonne looked much more like his girlfriend than I did. If this had happened in the past, I wouldn't have been able to suppress my temper. I would have started a massive fight right then and there. But now I simply let out calmly and indifferently. Oh, my voice didn't even show a single ripple of emotion. Just taking medication isn't enough, I said. My voice empty of emotion. You can also massage her, hold her close when you sleep at night, and keep her hands and feet warm. Yvonne's face flushed a deep crimson. Mary, I didn't mean it like that. Tony, however, assumed my well-intentioned advice was just me throwing a tantrum. Out of spite. His tone turned icy as he asked, are you still throwing a fit? Just because I didn't report my business trip to you 2 weeks ago? On his birthday, I worked frantically, grueling overtime, to finish a project just so I could clear my schedule. I personally cooked a table full of his favorite dishes and picked up a custom-made gift that I had ordered months in advance. I did it all just to celebrate his birthday. I waited until midnight, but Tony never came home. I didn't know until I saw Ivan's social media post. Tony had left the country for an overseas medical exchange program. When I finally reached him, Tony brushed it off completely. It's just a business trip. There was no need to consult you. Birthdays happen every year, but opportunities like this project don't. I thought you'd be able to distinguish between what's urgent and what's not. Don't you have your own things to worry about? Why are you always obsessing over my itinerary? The accumulated disappointment crashed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't stop myself from questioning him. Tony, is it true that in your hierarchy of importance, I will always be the least urgent, the least significant, and the most expendable one compared to my hysteria? Tony remained utterly composed, said just one thing before hanging up. You're not calm right now. We'll talk when I get back. After I had calmed down, I signed the transfer agreement to relocate to a branch office. Manager hesitated and looked at me with concern. Relocating means moving to a completely different city. For something this major, you should really discuss it with your boyfriend. You have a partner. You don't have to make such a serious decision. I signed my name swiftly, without a shred of hesitation. No need. The last time I changed jobs, as I was having 2 job offers, I asked for Tony's opinion. Tony merely glanced at the job offers. This is your life. Why should I choose for you? But he patiently guided Yvonne through her college applications. He helped her get accepted into the country's top medical school, so that she could become his junior. Tony always said I wasn't independent enough, that I was constantly complaining and I was too clingy. Whenever I excitedly tried to share a funny story with him, he would put on his headphones to listen to medical podcasts. He kept treating me as if I were invisible. When I was running late for work, he would refuse to drive me. He would emphasize that his schedule could not be disrupted. For my sake, if I wanted to join his gatherings with friends, he would tell me I needed to build my own social circle. For a long time, I genuinely believed Tony was just naturally distant and cold, and I thought that if I tried hard enough, I would eventually become the exception. Until Ivan appeared. She was the daughter of an old family friend of Tony's parents. He was entrusted to his care. I thought he would see her as a nuisance, but he agreed to look after her without a second thought. I never expected that she would be the actual exception. Tony replied to every single one of her rants about her roommates. Never. She craved a trending dessert. On a busy work day, he would drive across the city just to deliver it to her. During her hospital internship, he proactively introduced her to everyone. This is my junior. Please look out for her. Every time I fought with Tony over this, he would frown with deep disappointment. She's a kid. Are you a kid too? I look after her out of responsibility. Are you seriously throwing a jealous fit over this? How old is she and how old are you? But the kid he spoke of was only 3 years younger than me. All the excuses I had once made for him, that it was just his personality, that he was too busy with work, that he hated clingy people, every single one of them shattered into pieces. The face of the patients he showed to another woman. But that was fine. My surgery would be over tomorrow and I would leave this city. Then Tony and I would have absolutely nothing to do with each other anymore. My best friend Gina found out about my surgery and took a day off just to accompany me. Hurry up and clean out the guest bedroom to welcome your gold medal nanny, she texted. I replied with a smile. The guest room has already been cleaned twice. And I bought you brand new bed sheets. I guarantee you'll enjoy your stay. The moment I opened the door, my words died in my throat. The brand new bed sheets I had meticulously prepared were crumpled up and tossed carelessly onto the floor. The guest bedroom was crammed with unfamiliar belongings. Giant half-human-sized teddy bear was sprawled across the bed. It felt like a blatant declaration of ownership. The sound of the front door opening echoed, and it was followed by a soft laugh. Dr. Frank, thank you so much for taking me to check out that restaurant. It was seriously delicious. Yvonne's voice drifted in. All the bad vibes from being isolated by my roommates were completely cured by that dessert. Tony caught sight of me and quickly explained with a flat, detached voice. Yvonne had a falling out with her roommates and can't stay in the dorms anymore. She's planning to move out. She hasn't found an apartment yet. She'll be staying in the guest room temporarily. I let out a cold laugh. Tony, I told you a week ago that Gina was coming to stay here. Tony froze. The look on his face in that fraction of a second told me everything I needed to know. He had forgotten when I told him about it a week ago. His voice was dripping with impatience. You should decide on minor things like this yourself. Don't ask me about everything. It's exhausting. But now he pressed his lips together with his voice dropping slightly. I'm sorry. He held up a dessert bag with his tone softened, as if he was coaxing a child throwing a tantrum. The restaurant we went to today seems like the type you'd like. I'll take you there this weekend. I glanced at the logo on the paper bag. It was the exact restaurant I had repeatedly begged Tony to take me to in the past. Back then, his excuse was always that he was too busy with work. And he had no time. I took the paper bag and casually tossed it straight into the trash can. Tony's breath was caught in his throat before he could let it out. Ivan squeezed her way forward, speaking in her usual soft, delicate voice. Mary, it's all my fault. I can just squeeze into the bed with your friend. I really don't mind. I let out a sharp sneer, grabbing Ivan's bedsheets and the giant teddy bear. I threw them straight out into the hallway. Ivan gasped, her eyes instantly brimming with tears. Mary, those are the things I need to use tonight. What am I supposed to do if you just throw them away? I glanced toward the master bedroom and smiled politely. You can just squeeze in with Tony. I really don't mind. Ivan's face flushed a deep crimson. The hallway of the apartment was narrow, lit by a single bulb that cast long, amber shadows across the cream-colored tiles. The giant, half-human-sized teddy bear lay slumped against the baseboard, its glass eyes reflecting the dim light with a vacant, stupid stare. Beside it, the blue cotton sheets I had just ripped from the guest bed sat in a tangled, crumpled pile, smelling faintly of Yvonne's sweet, synthetic peach perfume. Yvonne's gasp was wet and dramatic, a sharp intake of air that she caught in her throat as if she were choking on her own innocence. Mary, her voice trembled, pitched at that exact frequency designed to make every man within a 5-mile radius feel a sudden, biological urge to defend her. I was only trying to help. Dr. Frank said you were always so busy with your M&A projects, and I didn't want to be a burden. You are not a burden, Yvonne, I said, my voice carrying the flat, level rhythm of a dry logistics report. You are an occupant, and currently you are occupying the space designated for my guest. Tony's face had gone from its usual pale, intellectual composure to a dark, dangerous crimson. The veins at his temples, usually hidden beneath his neatly parted dark hair, pulsed with a tight rhythmic twitch. He took a heavy step forward, his leather suitcase clicking sharply against the floor. Mary, apologize to her. Now, he commanded. It was the same tone he used with the residency students in the neurology ward, when they misidentified a spinal reflex, sharp, unyielding, and entirely convinced of his own absolute authority. She has no place to sleep tonight because of her roommate's pettiness, Tony continued, his knuckles whitening around the handle of his suitcase. And you're throwing her things into the dirt like a child throwing a tantrum? Where is your decency? Where is the maturity you always claim to have? I didn't look at him. I reached for the door handle of the guest room, checking the lock. It was smooth cold brass. The sofa in the study folds out. I said, my tone entirely neutral. The mattress is memory foam. It's 6 inches thick. I'm sure it's more comfortable than the floor of a dormitory. Mary, Tony's voice rose, a sharp, cracked sound that broke the quiet of the apartment block. I am not joking. You are being completely unreasonable. Yvonne is my junior. Her father was my mentor when I was a resident in Chicago. I have a professional and moral obligation to ensure she is safe. Then perform your obligation, Tony, I said, turning to look him dead in the eye. My gaze rested on the black cashmere overcoat still draped over Yvonne's shoulders, the one I had spent 3 weeks looking for in the boutique shops of the Northern District, the one I had saved 2 months of my personal salary to buy for his 3rd anniversary gift. The master bed is a king size, I added, a small, polite smile touching my lips. There's more than enough room for both of your obligations. You wretch. Tony took another step, his hand raising as if he wanted to grab my wrist, to shake me until the familiar, hysterical tears returned to my eyes, until I fell to my knees and begged him to tell me he still loved me. But before his fingers could touch the fabric of my sleeve, the heavy oak front door behind them was pushed open. Gina walked in. She was dressed in a dark wool trench coat, her hair damp from the cold rain. Outside, carrying a large leather duffel bag in one hand and a box of fresh pastries from the bakery down the street in the other. She took one look at the giant teddy bear on the floor, the crumpled blue sheets, the weeping Yvonne in Tony's overcoat, and Tony's hand suspended in midair. Gina set her pastry box on the shoe cabinet with a loud, deliberate thud. Am I interrupting a family meeting? She asked, her voice dry as tinder, her sharp gray eyes locking onto Tony's fingers. Or should I call the police to report an active domestic disturbance before I unpack my bag? The silence that followed Gina's entrance was different. It was heavy, clinical, and punctuated only by the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Tony slowly lowered his hand, his fingers curling into a fist before he slid them into his trousers pocket. The professional, detached mask of the deputy chief of neurology returned to his face, though his eyes remained dark with a cold, boiling frustration. Gina, Tony said, his voice dropping into that quiet, reasonable register he used when he was explaining a difficult diagnosis to a patient's family. You're early. Mary told me you weren't arriving until tomorrow afternoon. I took the night train, Gina said, not looking at him as she unbuttoned her trench coat and hung it on the brass hook near the door. Mary's undergoing a laparoscopic cystectomy tomorrow at 8. The clinical guidelines state that a post-op patient must have a designated adult guardian on-site for 24 hours to monitor for internal bleeding. Since her boyfriend is too busy managing the housing logistics of his research assistants, I figured I should be here to sign the release forms. Tony's brow furrowed, his eyes darting to my face for a fraction of a second. Before returning to Gina, I told her I would change my schedule to next week so I could accompany her. She's the one who insisted on doing it tomorrow. The clinic had an opening tomorrow due to a cancellation, Tony, I said, my tone as flat as a digital watch. If I wait until next week, the cyst might rupture, causing a systemic infection. As a doctor, I thought you'd be able to distinguish between what's urgent and what's convenient. Tony's lips pressed into a thin, rigid line. Yvonne quietly stepped back, her small, manicured hand reaching out to grab the sleeve of Tony's linen shirt. Dr. Frank, maybe I should go to a hotel. I don't want to cause trouble between you and Mary. I can just use my savings. You don't have any savings, Yvonne, Tony said, his voice softening instantly, as he turned to face her, his shoulder blocking me and Gina from his view. And the hotels near the medical center are $80 a night. It's too expensive for an intern. He turned back to me, his tone returning to its cold, executive precision. Yvonne will sleep on the chaise in the study tonight. I'll help her move her things. Gina, your room is ready. Thanks, Gina said, grabbing her duffel bag and walking straight into the guest room. She didn't look at Yvonne's teddy bear on the floor. She simply stepped over it as if it were a piece of discarded packing material. The apartment went quiet. I went into the master bedroom, closed the heavy door behind me, and sat down on the edge of the mattress. The sheets were clean, white, and smelled of nothing. This room used to be my sanctuary. I had spent 5 years decorating it, the linen curtains from the southern market, the small ceramic tray on the nightstand where Tony used to leave his watch, the dried lavender bundle hanging from the wardrobe. Now it felt as cold and transient as a hotel room on a business trip. The door opened. Tony walked in, his tie gone, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked exhausted, the gray shadows under his eyes prominent under the yellow light of the ceiling lamp. Are you still throwing a fit, Mary? He asked, walking over to the wardrobe to hang his blazer. The scene in the hallway was pathetic. In front of Gina? Do you really want our personal affairs to be the topic of your friends' group chats? My personal affairs are my own, Tony, I said, lying down on the bed and pulling the quilt over my shoulders. And I'm not throwing a fit. I'm simply tired. Tony stopped, his hand resting on the wooden door of the wardrobe. He stared at me, his eyes searching my face, trying to find the familiar, trembling line of my jaw. The tears that usually welled in my eyes when he used that cold, analytical tone. But he found nothing. My face was as still and silent as the concrete wall of the building outside. The surgery tomorrow, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Who is your attending physician? Is it Dr. Frank from the general surgery department? He's a junior consultant. His hand is too slow. I can call Chief Director Miller. Tomorrow morning. He can perform the laparoscopy in 15 minutes. There is no need, I said, my eyes drifting shut. Dr. Frank is very meticulous. He explained the procedure to me in detail. I trust him. You trust a junior consultant over my recommendation? Tony's tone turned sharp, a trace of offended pride showing through his fatigue. Mary, I am the deputy chief of neurology in this hospital. My recommendation is... Your recommendation is for next week, Tony, I whispered, turning my back to him, my body curling into a quiet, protective shape under the blanket. And my pain is tonight. Good night. The pre-op preparation room of the Municipal General Hospital was white, cold, and smelled of alcohol and steam. I lay on the narrow steel gurney, the green paper gown stiff against my collarbone, my hair covered in a blue elastic cap. The foreline in my left hand was cold, the saline solution dripping slowly into my vein with a tiny rhythmic tick. Gina sat on the plastic chair beside me, her laptop open on her knees, her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard as she reviewed the transfer files for my relocation to the San Francisco office. The lease for the apartment in San Francisco is ready for your signature, Gina said, not looking up from her screen. The company is covering the deposit and the first 3 months of rent. It's located in the south of Market area, 10 minutes walk from the new office. Thanks, Gina, I whispered, my throat dry from the 12-hour water fast. And the movers? She asked. They're arriving at the apartment on Friday at 9. Are you sure you don't want me to stay and help you pack? I've already packed my premarital belongings, I said. The boxes are in the Storage closet in the basement. Tony doesn't have the key. It'll only take 30 minutes to load them into the truck. A shadow fell over the frosted glass pane of the door. The door opened and Tony walked in. He was wearing his white lab coat, his stethoscope tucked into his pocket, his surgical mask hanging loosely around his neck. He looked professional, immaculate, and entirely out of place in the pre-op ward, which was outside his department. "Mary," he said, walking over to the gurney. He didn't look at Gina, who slowly closed her laptop and set it on the floor. "I looked at your labs on the system. Your hemoglobin is slightly low. You should have had an iron transfusion last week." "It's within the normal range for women, Dr. Frank," I said, my voice carrying that same, quiet, professional calm I had used in the hallway. Tony's brow furrowed. "I am your partner, Mary. In this hospital, you should refer to me as Tony. In this hospital, you are a deputy chief, Dr. Frank," I replied, looking at the black digital watch on his wrist, the one he always checked when he was trying to calculate how much time he was wasting on my conversations. "And I am a patient under Dr. Frank's care. Please respect the clinical boundaries." Tony's face went white. He turned his gaze to the clipboard hanging at the foot of my bed. His eyes scanned the emergency contact line. Emergency contact, Gina Vance, friend. Relationship to patient, designated adult guardian. "Why is Gina listed as your guardian?" Tony hissed, his voice dropping into a dangerous, low whisper as he leaned over the bed rail. "I work in this building, Mary. My office is on the 7th floor. If there is an anesthetic complication, the nurses should call me first. You have a neurological consultation with the regional board at 10, Tony," I said, my voice as clear and cold as the saline in my line. "And Yvonne's clinical report is due by noon. I don't want to disrupt your schedule for my minor issues. It's exhausting, remember?" Tony froze. The words hit him like a physical blow, the memory of his own dismissive lectures from the past 5 years suddenly returning to him in the stark, white light of the pre-op room. "Can't you look up minor things like this yourself? Stop relying on me like a giant infant. It's exhausting." He wanted to speak, to explain that he had only said those things because he was stressed, because the neurology department was understaffed, because he thought we had a lifetime to make it up to each other. But before he could open his mouth, the door opened wide, and 2 surgical nurses in green scrubs walked in. "Mary Browning?" the lead nurse asked, checking my wristband. "The OR is ready. For you. Let's go." Gina stood up, her hand gently squeezing my shoulder. "I'll be in the waiting room, Mary. Take a nice nap." "Thanks, Gina," I smiled. I didn't look at Tony. I closed my eyes, let the nurses slide the gurney out of the room, and let the heavy double doors of the surgical wing click shut behind me, sealing him out in the cold, white corridor. The recovery room was quiet, lit by the pale afternoon sun coming through the high window. The anesthesia had left a dry, bitter taste of copper in my mouth, and my abdomen felt heavy, tight, and slightly sore from the surgical gas. But the sharp, stabbing pain of the cyst was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow relief that made my chest feel lighter than it had in years. "Mary," a soft, hesitant voice whispered. I turned my head slowly. Yvonne was standing by my bed. She was wearing her hospital scrubs, her stethoscope tucked into her pocket, but her face lacked the sweet, triumphant glow she had worn in the hallway. She looked pale, her fingers twisting the edge of her clipboard with a nervous, rapid rhythm. "What do you want, Yvonne?" I asked, my voice raspy. I wanted to bring you your chart," she stammered, sliding the folder onto the table. "Dr. Frank, he's been in the ICU since noon. He had an emergency craniotomy for a trauma patient. But he called me 3 times during the surgery to check if you had woken up." She paused, looking down at her shoes. "Mary, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were actually sick. If I had known, I wouldn't have asked Dr. Frank to come with me to get the contraceptive prescription. It's just, my dysentery was so bad." "It's not dysentery, Yvonne," I said, looking at the medicine box on her clipboard. "It's a standard hormonal regulation for ovarian cysts. The same medication I was taking 2 years ago when Tony told me he didn't know which department I should register for." Yvonne's face went completely pale. I didn't know," she whispered. "Of course you didn't," I said, my voice quiet as the afternoon sun. "Because Tony only remembers the clinical guidelines when they apply to someone he cares about. You were his exception, Yvonne. But the problem with being an exception is that you eventually become a rule." I turned my head away, looking at the golden beam of light on the floor-to-ceiling glass window. "The discharge papers are signed, Yvonne. You can leave now." The moving truck was parked outside the apartment building on Friday morning, its diesel engine rumbling quietly in the wet, cold fog of the street. I stood in the center of the empty living room, wearing a simple gray coat, my suitcase at my feet. The cardboard boxes containing my books, my clothes, and my premarital belongings had already been loaded into the back of the truck by the two movers. The apartment smelled of nothing. The linen curtains were gone, the ceramic tray on the nightstand empty, the lavender bundle turned to dry gray dust in the trash can. The front door opened. Tony walked in. He was still wearing his suit, his tie loose, his hair messy as if he had spent the night sleeping in his office chair. He looked around the empty, cavernous space of the living room, his eyes wide, wild with a sudden, suffocating panic. Mary. His voice was a low, dry rattle. What is this? Where are your things? I'm leaving, Tony, I said, picking up my suitcase. Leaving? For how long? He took 3 quick steps toward me, his hands reaching out to grab my shoulders, but I stepped back, my heels clicking sharply against the concrete floor. A business trip? You didn't tell me you had a trip this week. It's not a trip, Tony, I said, pulling my transfer agreement from my bag and laying it on the shoe cabinet. I've relocated to the San Francisco branch. My contract begins on Monday. Tony grabbed the paper. His eyes scanned the bold letters at the top, then the signature of the HR director at the bottom. San Francisco, he whispered, his voice cracking with a raw, desperate fear. That's 3,000 miles away, Mary. You can't make a decision like this without consulting me. We've been together for 5 years. We were together for 5 years, Tony, I said, opening the door wide, the cold wind from the stairs blowing through the empty apartment. But during those 5 years, you kept telling me to be independent. You kept telling me to make my own decisions, to stop relying on you like a giant infant. I looked at his wet, pale face. I finally learned, Tony, I said, offering him a final, gentle smile. I'm independent now. Mary, please, Tony cried, dropping his suitcase and running toward me, his hands reaching out to grab my coat sleeve, but Gina stepped between us, her heavy duffel bag held like a shield against his chest. The truck is waiting, Mary, Gina said, her voice clear and authoritative. Let's go. Mary, wait. Tony screamed, his voice echoing through the empty, high-ceilinged corridors of the building as we walked down the stairs. I'll change my schedule. I'll resign from the hospital. I'll go to San Francisco with you. Just don't leave me in this silence. I didn't look back. I walked out of the building into the wet, cold morning, boarded the passenger seat of Gina's car, and let the heavy door slam shut, sealing his screams out in the gray mist of the city behind us. The coastal town of Mendocino was quiet in the winter. The air smelled of salt, pine needles, and the cold mist that rolled off the Pacific every morning. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic crash of the waves against the black cliffs of the harbor. I sat on a wooden bench on the deck of my small, gray-shingled cottage, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my hand. I was wearing a simple, dark green sweater, my abdominal scars completely healed, leaving only 3 tiny, pale lines on my skin that were invisible under my clothes. Beside me on the table lay my drawing tablet, its screen displaying a clean, elegant landscape design for our new municipal park project. A tall, quiet man with dark hair and a green backpack walked up the wooden steps of the deck, carrying a fresh batch of warm cinnamon rolls in a paper bag. It was Marcus, our firm's senior structural engineer, the man who had worked beside me for 2 years in San Francisco, holding the flashlight during our late-night site surveys, making sure I never had to walk 3 steps behind him. The wind is picking up, Mary, Marcus said, sitting down beside me and pulling a wool blanket over our knees. Are you cold? I looked down at the design on my screen, then at the golden sunset over the ocean, and finally at his warm, genuine smile. No, I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. I'm very warm. Across the water, the first yellow lights of the harbor were starting to glow in the dark, but I didn't look at them. I closed my laptop, took a sip of my warm tea, and let the clean, cold wind off the water carry the last dry leaves of the past away into the endlessly beautiful horizon ahead.